Okay, let's now get into programming structures. Before I get into pandas and numpy, I think so it's very important to understand programming structures. In our first sessions, we learned list, tuple, data, dictionaries, sets, and I used the terminology data structure. So there are two terms in front of you. One is a data structure, other is a programming structure. Data structure means how the data is organized, how the data is stored. What do you mean by programming structure? How the data should be processed. There are various kinds of programming structures. If basically if a particular condition is met, then do this. Then there is something called as if else. If a particular condition is met, then do something else. You do something else. Then you have got nested if, else if, else if, else. So basically these are called as conditional statements. Depending upon the condition matching, if the condition is matched, a particular syntax, particular set of code will get executed, and if the condition is not met, then it will not get executed. Then you have other programming structures which are called as for loop. For loop means there are certain number of iterations I want to get executed. There are certain other programming structures which are called as do while. Do a particular activity while a condition is true. So long as the condition is true, you keep looping, you keep executing in a loop, and you break out of the loop only when the while condition is false. So these are called as programming structures. I hope I'm very clear and the concept is very clear. What is programming structures? Let's start with our first programming structure, which is a conditional statement. Very simple, if, which is very basic for any programmer to know. So when we write these kind of programming structures, we have to say if a condition, and if the condition is matched, then you write certain statements which should get executed. So here I have written num equal to 5. I declared a variable num, assigned the value 5, and I'm saying if num greater than 0, print num is a positive number. Note the indentation. If I run it like this, if I keep it like this, the print statement will get executed because the print is now not inside if. Only by putting indentation, I am telling the Python interpreter that this print is part of the if statement. So if I run control enter, num equal to 5 got declared and num is greater than 0, print statement gets executed. This statement will get printed as a always get printed. This statement, okay, this print, what it is saying, this statement will always get printed as the line is out of the scope of if, because you see the indentation is not there. If I now make it -5, and I should put it here 0 because 0 is also considered positive number. This statement, now this time this print did not get executed. Reason being, it did not get executed because it is num is now -5. So you can see if the condition is matched, then the set of code which is below that condition and indented will get executed. Just quickly try this part of the code. I already explained num is equal to -5. Now we will get into if else. So here, if the condition is matched, then print positive or 0, else negative. So here I assign num equal to -4, control enter, negative number. I assign num equal to 4, the value is a positive or 0. So here we now see if else. Again note, there is a if part of the syntax, colon. After colon, I write all the codes, all the syntaxes which I want to get executed. I can write multiple syntaxes. Print, this is a second statement in if part of the code. Now when I have the condition if matching, to print will get executed. So anything which is indented after if, all of that will get executed. The moment I have all my codes related to if condition completed, I have else. The indentation of else should not be there. Okay. Try out this part of the code, if else. Let us now see if else if. So just compare the if else. In case I've got multiple conditions, I need to write if else if. So here if, the text expression body, elif. Note the syntax is elif. Else if is abbreviated as else if. Many other programming languages use else if, but here in Python we have elif. Something like this. So here I've got if num is greater than 0, positive. If num equal to elif, num is equal to 0, 0, else negative number. So I run this. So this becomes if elif. Okay. We can have nested if else also. This is how nested if else can be written. If a condition is matched, then you write another if condition inside it and else. The indentation of the nested part of if else can be seen. So this way you can write nested if else also. So let's move forward. We are now moving into control statements. We have learned conditional statements, which are part of programming structures. We now get into control statements or loops. They are also part of the programming structures. Now, as we discussed, there are certain control statements or loops: for loop, while loop. Uh, in some programming language, we call it do while. In some programming, we call it do until. And there are two important elements which is called break and continue and pass. So let's just see these looping structures in Python. Now first thing we'll get into for loop. If you recollect, in our data structure session when we were discussing list, I said lists are called iterables. So here let's create a list. Numbers equal to 653842541, and note there is a rectangular bracket. So I created a list which has got 9 elements. I want to sum all of these values. I have just initiated a variable sum, assigned it value 0, and here I write for val in numbers. This part of the for, let me increase my font size. It seems it's smaller. Let me increase this. Okay. So here when I see for val in numbers, what I'm saying is in a iterative loop, you take one value of numbers, assign it to val. So in the first iteration, the value 6 will get assigned to val. And when I enter into this for loop, this part of the code is indented, and I'm doing sum is equal to sum plus val. Whenever these kind of syntax gets executed, the RHS, right hand side, RHS, right hand side gets executed first. What is the value of sum? The value of sum is 0 at this point of time. 0 plus val is 6, 0 plus 6. So the total addition will become 6 and it gets assigned to sum becomes 6. Now in the next iteration, the value 5 will get assigned to val, and sum is equal to sum plus val. This time sum is 6, 6 plus 5, 11. So this way it will loop, and when all of these values are exhausted, the loop will break because there is no further element to loop for. I will come to this print statement. I will get the sum. So I've executed it, and the sum total is 48. Let me just once again try it by adding one more number, 9. So 48 add 2. 48 plus 2, 50. So this time it should say 50. Sum is 50. I'm going back, 48. Try out this part of the syntax. There is a function in Python, range. Range function helps you create a sequence of values. So when I use a range function like this, 10, it will create values between 0 to 10. Default, it will get initialized as 0. And when I pass it in list, it will convert that as a list. And if I say range 2 to 8, it will create a range from 2 to 8. Always remember the last index. When you have start index and end index, the end index is not inclusive. And this is the last syntax of range. When I have a range something like this 2, I'm focusing here where I have highlighted the syntax. Range 2, the start index is 2, comma 20, end index is 20, comma 3. The 3 is saying that get me values in steps of 3. So 2, then 2 plus 3, 5, 5 plus 3, 8, 8 plus 3, 11, 11 plus 3, 14, 14 plus 3, 17, and 17 plus 3, 20, but end index is not inclusive. That's why you don't get 20. So these are just a range function which I have introduced here. We will use it later, but for now, just at a very high level, you should understand that there are certain inbuilt functions by which you can generate sequence of values, and one of the important function in that is range. Just try this range.
So last
Let me break the last syntax in multiple steps. Range list is equal to list, and here I'm using a function range, and then I say 2 comma 20 comma 3 bracket closures, bracket closures. If I just run this function like this, Control C, hash range, it is returning me an object of the function range. It simply highlights that. If I put this range inside a list function, it shows me the output in a list format. And when I run the syntax like this, I am assigning this list to a variable range list. Now because I have assigned it to range list, nothing has got printed, And if I say print range underscore list, it will print the values. And instead, if I remove this and directly take this component and put it here, it's as good as the same thing, print range. So basically I can store it in a variable or I can directly print it. But the objective is not to print. The objective is not to run a syntax for printing purpose. The objective is to demonstrate when we would like to have a sequence of values from a start index point till end index point, we can use a range function. And in that range, if you want the values to be generated in certain steps, you can also use the range function where you can provide your start index, which is 2 in this case, in this example, end index, which is 20 in this example, and the steps is 3. So this is just a range function, which quite often in our programming we may require.
But it don't show 20.
Just in case we want 20 also to be part of the output, we have to make it 21 because in Python end index is always excluded. So you may have to change the code something like this. Let's move forward. Here we have got a genre, and in this genre I've just created a list, and then I'm running a for loop. Now here I have used range. Okay, so what I've done is length. Alien is giving me how many items are there in this list. So I'm running a for loop from I in range. What will be the value of this range? Because I have used range function, this is the range. I do not pass the start index. So let's break up. Genre, step 1, you are creating a list. If I simply run alien genre, it will tell you how many elements are there. 4. So it will return a value 4. This 4 I am putting in a function range, and it will become something like this 4, which means I'm creating a range from 0 to 4. 0 is the start index, 4 is the end index. End index is always excluded. Then I am putting this range in a for loop for I in the range. So in the first loop, I will take the value 0. In the second loop, it will take 1. Then it will take 2. And then it will take 3. Okay. 4 will be excluded because end index is not included. Then I say print I like genre 0. Genre 0 is pop. Then I say I like genre 1. Genre 1 is rock. Then I say genre 2 jazz. Genre 3 shastriya. The moment it touches value 4, it becomes out of range. The for loop will stop. So this is where I am now used the range just to explain the range functionality. So let me delete these intermediate explanations, and this is the code which I'll just press Control Enter. Yeah, this is the output. Try it out. Now, most of the programming languages which you come across, when they give you for loop, you will see that it will have a for condition, and so long as the condition is matching, it will execute. However, in Python, there's a else clause also. I've not come across this else part in other programming languages, but in Python, you have got something called as else. Now, what is the utility of this else? So when you have a for loop, it will keep executing the loop. The moment all the iterations have been successful, assume you want to create a log in some audit table. Okay, you want to insert some information in an audit table, you can make use of this else. That the moment a for loop is successfully completed, at the end you should have a audit entry. Now here I don't have any audit entry, so I'm just saying no more items left to display. So here I'm created a digits. There are 3 elements. I'm running a for loop and I'm saying print the number, and the moment the for loop all digits are considered of the list, it will get into else and say no items to display. Okay, so this is a very simple application of else. So I'll just quickly move forward. I'll execute it and move forward to while loop. Now, what is the use of while loop? While loop, as I mentioned, it is something like do while in other programming languages, or it is also called as do until. So the condition is while you give a condition which is represented by test expression. So long as the condition is true, all the statements will get executed in the body of the while loop. So here I've written a small program. N is equal to 5. I've initiated a value n as 5. Sum is equal to 0 and I is equal to 1. I am saying that while I is less than n, so long as the value of I is less than n, you keep looping. The moment the value of I exceeds n, you should break out. Okay. You can say that I can do the same task using a for loop for I in range n, and only that many times the loop will get executed. I completely agree. But the point is, when you specifically use a while loop is when the condition for the while loop, here it's a very simple that I is less than n. But if the value of the condition is determined inside this body, and in the next iteration you have to take that value here and check whether I should go one more iteration, where you are not clear how many times you have to run the loop. How many in for loop you have to be very clear how many times the loop has to be executed. But when you are not clear how many times the loop has to be executed, but you know when a specific condition is going to be met, immediately I should break out of the loop. In that case, we do not use a for loop, we make use of while loop. In this case, I have given a very simple condition, I is less than equal to n. Okay, but in business scenarios, you may have a complicated condition. That complicated condition value will get evaluated here, and it will then get checked in the test expression here to decide whether to go for the next iteration or whether should break out. Okay, this is application of a while loop. So let's just quickly run it. Control enter. Sum is 15. It executed certain number of times and then it came out of the while loop. So just try out this while loop and then we will expand on this while loop, where we are again going to make use of else, break, continue, other options. Resume. Now here we have the while loop and else. So here I have set counter equal to 0. I'm saying counter less than 3, print inside loop, counter equal to counter plus 1, else print inside else. What I'll do is I'll make changes in the above syntax only. I'll just take else and write it here. Else colon print inside the else, and rather than saying print inside the else, we'll move this print above. The sum is this much. I'll comment this one. So here you have executing a while loop. The moment the while loop condition is satisfied, you are breaking out, and I want at that point of break, I want something to be written in a audit log table. I can make use of a print statement. So I run this, the output will remain same. So here the sum total is, I'm just changing uh, the text so that we can understand the code got executed. Control enter. Now here you can see the sum total is 15. So just make a small change in the previous code and rerun it. Again, this else, you will note, is not part of many other programming language. In Python is where I have seen with a while loop you have a else component. Now we will see break and continue. These are very two important uh, syntaxes which are available in other programming languages also. What is break and continue? Break is if certain condition is met. For example, you are running a for loop, and in that for loop there is a certain condition which is met. Then you want to not proceed with further iterations and you want to break out of the for loop. In that case, we make use of a break. The second application is of continue. I'm running a for loop, and if a certain condition is met, I want to skip certain syntax execution depending on whether the condition is met. If the condition is met, I want certain syntaxes, certain part of the code not to be executed, and I want to start with the next iteration. In that case, we make use of continue. So here I am writing for val in Python, and here when I write this val in Python, this string will get converted as a tuple. Now why it gets converted to tuple, frankly, I don't know, but when I write for val in Python, it will loop through this string character by character. Then I am checking if val is equal to h. The moment this condition is met, I'm saying break out of the loop. And if I break out of the loop, this print, you would note, does not get executed, and directly this print will get executed. Let me just run it. So I have just executed Python. There are 6 characters. In the first iteration, value is p, so it says p, print val. This print val gets printed, it says p. Then second value is y, print, I get y. Third iteration, it is t, print t. Fourth iteration is h, condition is met, and I have used the term break. Break means break out of the loop. The moment I break out of the loop, else does not get executed. So how you can use else is, if a particular piece of code is successful, all of the iterations have got successfully executed, you go and make an entry in the audit log, all iterations successfully executed. But in case there is a break, you do not make any entry in the audit log. Technically, you should make an entry in audit log also saying that all iterations were not successful. But here, else can be used only when all iterations are successfully completed. If all of a sudden there is a break, else part of the while loop or the for loop does not get executed. So just try this for loop with a else and a break. Now what we'll do is we'll just replace the word break by continue. Same code, but we'll replace break by continue. What continue does is when you have the continue, if the condition is met, it's saying break that execution of the loop. Just do not execute that loop. You go to the next cycle. So when I am here, first iteration, it says P is not equal to H. Second iteration, it says Y is not equal to H. Third iteration, it is T is not equal to H. So I get the P, Y, T. But when it is H equal to H, I'm saying skip this iteration. That's why H is not printed. O gets printed. N, it gets printed. And here, when I used continue, I have not inadvertently broken out of the loop. All the iterations of the loop has been successful. That's why the else part gets executed. In break, all iterations of the for loop were not completed. That's why else did not get executed. But in continue, all iterations got executed. That's why the else gets printed. So you just have to change the word break by continue and try out this example. There's just a none, if none, print hello. Just it's a none is a keyword. So I'm just doing that. So it does not print anything. We have already seen the range function earlier. So here we just created a range 2 to 19, here range, and I'm just using a simple syntax for I in range 5, and I'm printing it. So this range is already covered at depth in the previous part when I explained the range concept here. So this is just a repetition, so we can ignore it. With this, we have completed the conditional statements, the looping structures. So programming structures, we have completed this part. So with this, we can conclude today's session. Thank you. See you in the next session. Till then, bye bye.